that George Bush wants to get rid of Saddam Hussein. No surprise that there is reported to be a secret multi-million-dollar fund to do just that. No surprise that the director of Central Intelligence has reportedly been in the Middle East talking about it. But is the U.S. really trying to overthrow Saddam Hussein?
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
Now, here's an intriguing story out of today's Philadelphia Inquirer. It quotes several administration officials as conceding that they have no fresh plans for ousting Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein. But they say they want the impression created that an expanded covert operation is in the works in order to unnerve Hussein and to rebut domestic criticism of President Bush for failing to overthrow him. Now, if you'll pardon me for a moment, it's time for a little mind-bending here. If you were really mounting covert operations against Saddam, why would you ever confirm that for anyone in the media? I mean, if you were going to do it, you wouldn't talk about it, right? Unless, of course, you just wanted to convey the impression that you were going to do it to make Saddam nervous. But if you were about that, why would you ever tell the Philadelphia Inquirer not to take all this covert operation talk seriously? Presumably, you could have achieved the same end result by saying nothing in the first place. But then I suppose there wouldn't be all this sense of activity. Here's John Martin to clear it all up.
Nearly a year after the end of the war, Saddam Hussein remains firmly in power, harassing United Nations inspectors and symbolizing George Bush's frustration and impotence.
The Reagan administration had Gaddafi and Nixon had Ho Chi Minh, and you can practically always find some nationalistic, hardline third world leader who has driven American presidents nuts. And Saddam is this administration's bête noire.
Bête noire, literally black beast, defined as someone detested. Now, in the last 6 days, there have been a series of reports suggesting that a new American effort is underway to overthrow Saddam Hussein. Friday, the New York Times reported that CIA Director Robert Gates had been dispatched to the Middle East to discuss the ouster of Hussein with officials in Egypt and Saudi Arabia. The same morning, the Wall Street Journal reported the president had notified congressional committees of a new intelligence finding which permits the CIA to expand covert activities aimed at removing Saddam Hussein from power. Returning from a trip that day, the president cautioned against believing everything in the newspapers, but added,
"I'd like to see him out of there. I'd just leave it right there."
Saturday, another story. The Los Angeles Times reported Mr. Bush had authorized the CIA to target Hussein with a $30 million covert action fund. What's going on here?
Over all the years I've been in this town, 20 some odd years, when they really want to have a covert operation, it stays covert. And here we get leaks about findings, leaks about the CIA director taking a trip. It's a psychological operation, I think, to convince the people who want to overthrow Saddam Hussein that this time we're serious, they will be there.
So was this the beginning of the end game to rid the world of Saddam Hussein, or just posturing, perhaps for political profit here at home? Mr. Bush's advisors are reported to be keenly aware that American voters regard Hussein as unfinished business. They know that any decisive action to remove him before the U.S. elections, especially if it succeeds, could revive George Bush's popularity instantly, especially if it appears he had something to do with it. Some analysts believe that such an event could win a tight election, where swing voters who now regard the war as a failure might change their minds and tip the balance in Mr. Bush's favor. But is the CIA really going after Hussein? Government officials told ABC News the reported covert action fund contains about $20 million, not $30 million. Comes from various agencies, not just the CIA, and is not intended to remove Hussein, but to provide food, clothing, and medicine to keep alive Kurds and Shiites who oppose Saddam. Inside Iraq, at a secret location, a Kurdish leader said today he sees no sign of any U.S. assistance, covert or open.
As far as we are concerned, in this part of the country, in fact, we are not aware of any such activities, and we have no evidence to support this report.
As for Saddam Hussein's future, on television Sunday, President Bush's chief of staff denied a special role for the CIA, but flatly predicted Hussein's downfall.
We believe that there's a lot of pressure on him, and we believe that inevitably he will be, people in his country will take over.
But Ahmed Chalabi, an Iraqi opposition strategist exiled in London, says the U.S. scenario is unrealistic.
It is unlikely that Saddam will be removed from power by his guards and advisors. They are people of enormous advantage in Iraq. They are related to him, their commanders are, and they feel that his removal will threaten their lives.
All along, the White House has said it prefers a coup by Hussein's ruling circle rather than a popular revolt. Policymakers fear that would lead Shiite extremists to take power.
How will Iran and Turkey and Saudi Arabia react? Could it ignite an internal civil war in Iraq? What would that lead to? Those are all legitimate questions, and what I don't sense from any of the leaks is that the administration is sure of how to answer those questions.
Which raises one more question. What has Robert Gates been doing? Informed sources say he is gaining assurances from King Hussein of Jordan and President Rafsanjani of Iran that they will crack down on violations of the embargo against Iraq. So the news leaks hinting of secret plans are almost certainly meant to be psychological pressure and nothing more. Despite all the threats, despite the reports of plotting, there is no sign that the United States or its allies have launched or are about to launch any significant military action to remove Saddam Hussein, either directly or by arming his opponents. This is John Martin for Nightline in Washington.
A little more than an hour ago, we talked by satellite phone with Hoshyar Zebari, a member of the Kurdish Democratic Party in northern Iraq. Mr. Zebari, you've told my colleague, John Martin, that the Kurds are receiving no covert, or for that matter, overt assistance from the United States. Why do you think the Bush administration is putting out stories that covert operations are either being planned or are already underway?
Well, I think part of the aim is to increase psychological pressure on Saddam Hussein by reminding him that the West is still there, and it will increase its pressure to remove him. But I think here this idea of covert operation will put us back in square one. As far as we are concerned, in fact, we haven't been receiving or seeing any such aid.
It seems a little bit silly, if you'll pardon my saying so. Surely Saddam has good enough intelligence that he knows whether you are receiving aid or are not receiving aid. And if there's a lot of talk out of Washington and no action, it's not going to delude him for very long.
That's true. In fact, I agree with you. But as far as we are concerned here, the Kurdish opposition is the main opposition group, and it is in control of virtually most of the Kurdish territory in the north. And also, Mr. Koppel, you have to remember that the Kurds are talking with the Iraqi government to negotiate an autonomy arrangement. So, as far as the Kurds are concerned, unless there is a better political alternative for them, I don't think they will be engaged in any such action.
One more quick question, and if you would please, a quick answer. It's possible that the U.S. government really does not want to see a breakup of Iraq altogether. It surely would like to see Saddam Hussein out of power, but that it doesn't want to send assistance because it doesn't want to see the fragmentation of Iraq. Do you think that may be the reason you're not getting help?
Well, in fact, we, as far as we are concerned, we uphold Iraqi sovereignty too. I don't think there is anybody interested in breaking up the country. So if that is the reason, I think before any such move could take place to remove him, that there should be an understanding and cooperation between different Iraqi opposition groups.
I want to thank you very much. I appreciate you joining us. Thank you. Hoshyar Zebari. When we come back, we'll be joined by Senate Foreign Relations Committee staff member Peter Galbraith, who's made numerous fact-finding missions into Iraq, and by New York Times columnist William Safire, who says the U.S. has no choice but to try to remove Saddam Hussein.
This is ABC News Nightline. Brought to you by Charles Schwab.
Today, Tektridge Shoe Corporation announced a major retail expansion in 25 U.S. cities.
When I see a company that looks like a good investment, I check it out myself.
We make it easier to follow your own lead.
At Charles Schwab, I can get quotes, financial news, and when I make a trade, commission savings.
Always there to give you just the help you need.
Help yourself at Schwab today.
How can it be that an automobile, a mere 9 inches larger on the outside, gives you over 2 feet more room on the inside? Maybe it's the new math. The all-new 1992 Toyota Camry. We just couldn't leave well enough alone.
If you're in the market for the best sport utility vehicle, think twice before you buy. Ford Explorer passed all the rest to become the new leader, the best seller in its class. Think about comfort and cargo capacity. Ford Explorer provides more total room for passenger comfort and cargo capacity. Think about the competition. Ford Explorer outsells Jeep and Chevy combined. Think about value. Right now, save up to $1,900 on select Ford Explorers. See your local Ford dealer and prepare to be impressed.
You've heard about the risks of breast implants. Now, Chris Wallace asked the manufacturers what they knew and when they knew it. Watch Primetime Thursday.
Joining us now from Ferney-Voltaire, France, is Peter Galbraith, the senior staff member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and an expert on the Iraqi opposition. And from our Washington studio, New York Times columnist William Safire. Peter Galbraith, first of all, despite your staff position with the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, you wouldn't necessarily have access to classified information, in fact, probably would not, having to do with something like a presidential finding or covert action. So what is it that makes you believe, then, that there are no such plans underway?
Well, let me first say that, indeed, I do not have access to such information, and if I did, of course, I couldn't be here talking to you about it. I don't know whether such plans are underway or not, but I do maintain regular contact with Kurdish leaders, such as Hoshyar Zebari, and they tell me the same things that Hoshyar Zebari told you, that they see no sign of any activity being underway.
What is, I mean, have they been asking for it? Have they been requesting assistance?
They have been requesting assistance. They've been seeking some military assistance. Principally what they need is training in the weapons they captured from the Iraqis, as well as spare parts and ammunition. They're also seeking financial assistance. After all, the Kurds are administering a territory that is about a quarter of Iraq. It has a population of 2 to 3 million, and they have no real sources of revenue. Their estimates of the needs are very modest, something in the order of $15 million a month, given the size of the territory, but of course much larger than the figures you were discussing earlier in your show on the size of the proposed covert plan.
Bill Safire, you are just as convinced that indeed there are covert plans, if not underway, at least on the drawing board.
Ted, I think what we have here is a twofer. We have a covert plan asked for and developed on how to help an indigenous revolt succeed. And at the same time, we have a war of nerves to try to rattle not Saddam Hussein himself, I don't think he's rattleable, but the people around him, and one hopes a Sunni group in Baghdad. Now you have both things going, a real plan and the reverberations from that plan, the war of nerves, the psychological warfare. So it's not a question of it ain't happening or it's manipulation. It's both, and I think it's a good idea for us to talk about.
Let us first of all talk about the psychological warfare. You'll be writing about this in your column, I'm sure, coined the word unrattleable this evening with regard to Saddam Hussein. What makes you think that anyone around him is rattleable, given that there was a great deal more saber rattling back in November and December of 1990 and then into January of 1991. He now clearly must understand that when George Bush threatens that he can deliver, and last year did deliver. But he wasn't rattled by that, and apparently neither was anyone else around him. So what makes you think that a $20 or $30 million covert action is going to do it?
I don't think the talk is going to throw him out or really encourage his aides to throw him out. I think what we're going to have to do is say, what's our national interest? Is he getting a nuclear capability again? He certainly wants to. Is he breaking the rules of the disengagement? Is he going to become a threat with rockets, with perhaps hiring Soviet scientists, a threat to the United States, not just the Kurds, not just the Saudis? And if that is coming, if our intelligence tells us that's what's developing, then I think we have to decide to nip it in the bud.
Now, that, of course, is a far cry from the psychological operation that you were talking about, from the psychological warfare. Mm-hmm. You are now talking about a full-fledged operation, and that brings me back to my initial question. If indeed the United States, and particularly the CIA, was going to become involved in something like that, to go back to something Marty Schram said earlier in this broadcast, that's not the sort of thing they then talk about to even distinguished journalists like yourself.
But there's the fascinating thing about this one. This is so logical that it can't be avoided. If Saddam becomes and is developing a threat, then he has to be dealt with. How do you deal with him? You're not going to do Son of Desert Storm. You're not going to send another 500,000 American troops over there, barring an attempted invasion of Saudi Arabia. So how do you nip this in the bud? How do you stop the development of a new nuclear device? And the only way to do it is to provide the cover for, military cover, for an indigenous revolt. So that's what we have a CIA for, and that, I think, is what is in the works.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Peter Galbraith, I'd like your informed opinion on just whether the Kurds are prepared to do that and whether they're, in fact, prepared to accept the word of the United States, given all that has transpired over the past year or so. We'll continue our discussion in a moment.
To the one I love.
Deep in the cold heart of winter, you can make it warm. This Valentine's Day, remember them all with an 800 call. It's AT&T. Fast, convenient, and free. Call if you need an 800 number for flowers or candy or anything dandy.
This is dedicated to the one I love.
A car is a car. It won't make you handsome or prettier or younger, and if it improves your standing with the neighbors, then you live among snobs. A car is steel, electronics, rubber, plastic, and glass. A machine. And in the end, may the best machine win. Subaru. What to drive.
Being traditional is the best approach, and Valentine's Day is no exception. Let romance shine through with a box of candies made fresh daily from Suzette's. Customize your gift with the huge selection at Suzette's. Cream-filled nuts, truffles, caramels, chocolates of every sort. Suzette's even makes sugar-free candies. Beautiful Valentine boxes that fit everyone's budget, from $1.25 to $100. Call today to have a box specially packed and shipped UPS to any of your loved ones in all 50 states. Suzette's Candies at 2837 Ingersoll and South Ridge Mall.
6 dead, dozens wounded. Post office massacres. Can working under the gun at the post office drive a person to murder? Watch 2020 Friday.
Tomorrow, what does it take to get order in the court? Find out behind the scenes with the Night Court cast.
Then Hollywood through the eyes of Arsenio Hall. Tomorrow on Good Morning America.
Peter Galbraith, the Kurds have been betrayed not by one, but by at least 2 American administrations over the past 20 years. I say betrayed in the sense that they have been led to believe that assistance would be coming if only they took certain actions. Why would they be inclined to trust Washington yet a third time?
Well, I'm not sure they are. I think we have to look at what the situation of the Kurds is right now. The most of Kurdistan is liberated. It's under the control of the Kurdish political parties, which is to say that there are 2 to 3 million people whose lives are at risk if the Kurds were to undertake some activity that invited a harsh Iraqi response. Now, they saw what happened to them in March of 1991 when they felt they'd been encouraged to rebel by President Bush's call on the Iraqi people to overthrow Saddam. They thought they were going to get assistance. None was forthcoming. And as a result, 2 million people fled to the mountains with thousands of casualties. And certainly before they would undertake any future action, I think they would want a very open and very solid commitment, which raises another point, which is why any activity necessarily needs to be covert. There are many things that can be done quite overtly that might serve to undermine Saddam Hussein's regime.
Interesting question, Bill Safire. I mean, the president has certainly been more than open in expressing his wish to see Saddam overthrown. So if the United States, together with its United Nations partners, wants to provide open support, who or what is to prevent them?
Well, I think what we're seeing in this program, Ted, is a concern that maybe this whole thing is politically motivated. Maybe the president is making these noises to get at his bête noire and to improve his position in the polls. I don't see that at all. If the president decides to undertake a program that would help overthrow Saddam, I don't think he's going to get people killed for his poll ratings. That's not the way it works with any president. I think he's going to make his decision on the basis of America's national interest, and the Kurds will react on their national interest. And I think that comes late spring, early summer, we're going to make an assessment about the intelligence we're given on whether or not Saddam is getting a nuclear capability again. We underestimated them before. We're not going to underestimate them again.
And if that is the case, and I think your warning is well taken, Bill, and perhaps it is unfair to even suggest that there is any domestic political agenda being served here, let's simply set that aside and address the question that Peter Galbraith has raised, and that is President Bush doesn't need to go covert in terms of convincing the American public that getting rid of Saddam Hussein is a good idea. Why does this have to be done covertly?
Yeah, but you can talk about sanctions, and we should have sanctions, but will they ultimately bring him down? I don't think so.
No, but I mean, if weapons are to go to Kurds, if money is to go to the Kurds, if food, medicine is to go to the Kurds, why does that have to be done covertly?
That's the way it's done, and the Kurds should resolutely deny any sort of receiving them until the moment arrives.
Well, I'm not sure I understand it, but Peter Galbraith, maybe you can explain it to me. Why is it done that way? Why does it have to be done that way?
I'm not sure that it does have to be done that way. And in fact, I think the most important part of the Kurdish equation, anyhow, is a clear commitment, perhaps provided by the United Nations Security Council, that the world community will protect the Kurdish people, protect any autonomy arrangement they might reach, or at least will protect them from resumed attacks by the Iraqi regime. There are some other steps that can be taken openly. One is to more tightly enforce sanctions, because the current leakage in sanctions is one of the things that's enabling Saddam Hussein to sustain his regime. And finally, something that could be done openly that was much talked about a year ago, but of which we heard nothing of late, would be to pursue Saddam Hussein and his cronies, both for war crimes for the things that were done in Kuwait, and for crimes against humanity for the things that have been done to the Kurds and to the Shia.
Who's going to actually bring him to a trial?
Well, you don't necessarily need to, I mean, of course you aren't going to be able to get physical custody on him until he's overthrown or there's a change of regime. But the fact of an indictment would send a very strong signal that Saddam's policy of trying to outlast sanctions will not work. that there is no way that the world community is going to accept Iraq into the community of civilized nations as long as Saddam and his Ba'ath Party regime are still there. That's the practical effect of an indictment. It shows that we mean business to people in Baghdad who at least when they saw what happened in March had some doubts as to whether we really wanted this regime to go.
Bill, we're down to our final 5 or 10 seconds, if you can be real pithy.
I think what we're going to have is a big headache on our hands, getting worse and worse unless we help others in a coordinated way act.
Bill Safire, Peter Galbraith, thank you both. We'll be back in a moment.
It's kind of unbelievable that people in America are eating 40 pounds of sugar a year. I was told about it, first of all, by someone who was a nutritionist and said, Sherry, you've got to make some changes in your diet. I have equal, and I feel happier because I feel okay, it tastes good to me, it's just there, I use it, I like it. You got the sugar, you got the pink stuff, and you got the Equal.
Only Equal has 100% NutraSweet, no sugar, no saccharin.
I choose Equal.
Look at these red marks. These old glasses do nothing but pinch. They're a pain.
You don't have to put up with glasses that don't fit anymore.
Now LensCrafters brings you better fit for greater comfort. LensCrafters glasses fit your snug points with features like new self-adjusting snug fit pads that flex to gently and securely hug your nose.
No more pinching. I never knew glasses could be this comfortable.
LensCrafters, better fit for greater comfort. In about an hour.
Now there's a man in a state of full active suspension. This is the only car on the road that has it. It's the car that has the Germans shaking in their lederhosen. It's got no shocks. It's all controlled by computer. You want to take it for a spin? You just tell an Infinity dealer you've got a Mercedes to trade in. They love that. Infinity. Makes you want to take up driving again, doesn't it?
Now there's another way to plug into freshness. New Glade plug-in shell.
Plug it in, plug it in.
A new shell design and 2 new fresh scents.
Plug it in, plug it in.
It gently warms this refill cartridge for 30 days of freshness.
Freshen up the air. Freshen everywhere. Plug it in, plug it in.
Glade plug-ins and new Glade plug-in shell.
Plug it in.
From S.C. Johnson Wax.
Later on most of these stations, ABC's World News Now will have the latest news, sports, and weather. That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
If you wish a video cassette version of Nightline, the cost is $14.98 plus $3.95 shipping and handling.
Nightline is a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
Wednesday, a bitter custody battle.
I fed Cameron, I bathed Cameron, now I'm supposed to just walk away from him?
I can make Cameron a ward of the court and put him in a temporary care facility.
No.
Or I can put him with Mr. Howell.
Civil Wars, Wednesday at 10, 9 Central.
Is that all right with you, Cameron?
Snow developing overnight with a low in the teens.